I'd like to introduce Jonathan Clark. Jonathan founded Sine-Wave Technologies in 2005 to provide a massively scalable and universal platform for the Internet of Things. And this is all independent of network provider and hardware. He's a veteran software architect and multiple patent holder for technologies focusing on real-time content analysis and linguistics. Clark was previously the CTO of Lionbridge Technologies, responsible for design and development and deployment of natural language systems. Could you define that after?
Yeah, sure.
Clark is a visionary and has spent his career developing enterprise software to simplify the complex. Jonathan?
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I have some slides. Paula did great. I mean, we love companies like that. It's the reason, as a company, we decided to get started. And we'll go into a little bit about what we think the Internet of Things is. Try to provide you some. I'm just going to provide you 3 stories tonight on what my experience and our experience as a company has been over the years when it comes to capitalization, raising money, and in many cases, many things similar to what Paula has experienced. But before I do that, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. First, a question: any VCs in the room? I won't talk too badly about them. And how many of you are just starting companies or running business? Okay. And any engineers? Okay, thank you. Just some idea of who we're chatting with tonight. So just a background about myself. I'm at the core of it all, a poor software developer, a person who has consistently had some strange ideas, and I like to try to implement my ideas. And for one reason or another, you end up either as a principal or running a company as a result. I don't seem to fit well in a regular organizations. But it's been a lot of fun. This is my 4th gig, I guess you'd say. I started developing software in my parents' house when I was 13. I sold my first software product to a pretty large company before I turned 15. And then I started my next business. I met someone that was doing compiler design, and I ended up writing some compilers, and that became a product that ended up getting sold to Motorola. And then I met another gentleman that was in the linguistics space, and he had founded a company, and I was working on some technology, and I said, well, we can make computers understand computer languages. Why don't we make them understand human languages? I didn't realize it was a very complicated problem. So we just started doing that, and we ended up building the company that became Lionbridge, and we took that from really very small company, just a few of us, to I think now it's 5,000 people. We took it public. So we went through the whole traditional multiple rounds of VCs and capitalization all the way through IPO, and I stayed there a few years even after the IPO. And then I found myself having a lot of free time. I said it's time to take a little bit of time off. I've been doing this for more than half my natural life, and I wanted to have a little bit of time to myself. And so I said I'll take a year or 2 off and just see what's going on. I had kids at this point, so I thought it would be good to actually see them more than 1 day a month, because at the rates before, you're traveling 20 to 28 days a month at really breakneck speed. So this was my chance to take a little time off, and within only a couple of months, my wife was like, you got to get back to work, you're driving me crazy. It's time to go and figure something out to do. And it was summertime, and I still remember it distinctly. The founder of the company, the language company, he called me, and I have a place up on Lake Sunapee in New Hampshire, and I was literally sitting, Coors Light, and it's a beautiful day out, and the phone in the house rings because I had gotten rid of my cell phone. This was 10 years ago. I said, I don't want to be found. I just want to be left alone. And he said, I have this investment in this company, and it's starting to feel shaky. Would you mind sniffing around and see what's going on? He says, it's this company that they're doing some telecommunications and wireless. And he said, we put some money into it, and can you make heads and tails of it? And I said, I'm not going anywhere until the fall. I said, well, I'll go, come September when the kids go back to school, I'll take a ride out, or we'll get on the plane and we'll have a look. So we went out there and we started looking into this company. It was a total disaster of a company, and we were able to help do a fire sale and get his money, or most of it, out of the company. But it really got me thinking, because they were trying to connect marine craft and provide a safety system, or basically a better version of the radio, marine radio, a more modern version of that. And they're trying to connect that and provide an alternate solution. And the idea was okay, but they had built this thing from the ground up. It was very proprietary, and it wasn't very open, and it was difficult to customize. We heard Paula speak about their ability to be agile and modular and customized to adapt to their customers' need. This was the exact opposite of that. It was very rigid and tough, and plus the company was very mismanaged. So it really started me on the path of thinking, is there an opportunity here? This is pre-iPhone, pre-mobile revolution, pre-tablet revolution. Is there an opportunity to create a software platform that starts to solve some of this interconnectivity problem, gathering data, making multiple devices of different manufacturers work together over a variety of networks? And that was really the seed to ultimately starting Sine-Wave. When I speak about the Internet of Things, the Internet of Things for us isn't one technology. It's not a sensor. It's not necessarily just a sensor and a modem and a cloud and gathering information. It's really a fundamental shift, as I said earlier, in the way we approach trying to solve problems. Think about it for a minute. When we had the PC, I call the Internet of Things the fourth major revolution in computing. You can argue with me which one, if it's 4 or 5 or 3, and which ones they are, but I don't think you'll argue much with this. At every major evolutionary step in computing, we look back, and it's easy for us to say, oh, that was obvious. But we changed the way we approach solving problems. And when we had the PC, we may remember going into our office, and there was a set of mailboxes in the front of the building. And you'd go get your mail, and you go to your desk or your cube or your seat, wherever, and you'd open the mail and you'd read it. And you get on your computer and you might type up a response. You put that in the intercompany mail. It might go in the same building, or it might go to another office, maybe even faxed. That was the way we communicated, almost a semi-formal way of communicating with colleagues within the same building. It's a little bit bizarre the way we think of it now, where we have our phone and we don't even text real words to each other, and we get some sort of response. And when the internet came along, the internet wasn't just about IP enabling the computer, it wasn't about browser, and it wasn't about the email. Those are all some technologies that existed as a result, as a byproduct of the internet evolution. But the internet allowed us to use those technologies to change the way we approach, for instance, a simple problem like communication. At that point, we came in, we didn't stop at the mailbox, or as often. We pulled up our desk, we opened our email client, we looked at messages that came in, and maybe we responded. And at that point, we were still responding in what I would say almost a semi-formal way. Thank you for the message, and you'd address the issue, and you'd sign off even with your name, regards, Jonathan, and you'd send that message. It's probably something we've all done. And along comes mobile, another major revolutionary step in computer. That was about, if the internet was about interconnecting all of the technologies that we had before in the computers, mobile was about taking that off of our desk, blanketing the world with a global network of communication, and shrinking down the computers that we had and making them work without having to plug them in as much. Still have to plug in my iPhone at least once a day. And all of a sudden now, we're interacting with our communication differently. Our email's always on. We now have text messaging, social messaging, and the way we communicate with each other even today is radically different than what we did before. So that simple evolution, we believe, is the reason why the Internet of Things, we've built upon the previous generations. Where we are today, we're at a point where sensors and wireless technology, these are what we call the axioms of the Internet of Things, we're seeing a radical reduction in cost in sensors and hardware down to near zero. It's almost free to put chips in light bulbs and in thermostats and in my microphone and everywhere that we go. That's readily available. Networks are readily available. Think of countries, the US is almost behind in this place. We ran wires, so it's crazy. Here in New England, you got wires still running around. You go to countries like India or China or Singapore, they said, forget it. They went from nothing to a completely wireless network. They leapfrogged where we are, and we saw that has provided us with low-cost connectivity globally between satellites, GPRS, LTE, and all the other network standards that run our mobile phones globally. The ability to have an intersection now where we have real-time information that we can access from the world and start to make business decisions with it. So our company, Sine-Wave, is really about providing a software platform that allows companies like Paula's to build great applications for their market to solve a problem using a combination of hardware, networking, technology to go after a specific vertical. Our customers are in every market from oil and gas to transportation to safety to asset tracking, telematics. They're almost in really every branch, healthcare, health and wellness. It's unbelievable. We don't provide those end applications, but we decided we wanted to build a software platform for those applications. So when we think, that's just my little bit of overview of the IoT, what we think it is and why we started the company. I always tell people, we want to give you the software tools to find the digital needle in the haystack of information. There's a lot of stuff out there, and I'm sure if you think of any business, if you can find that one piece of information that's important for your users and consumers, that's extremely valuable, and it changes the way they approach solving a problem. This is a little thought from Aaron Levy, and we like this. We like old traditional industries. How do we reinvent them using software? So I'm not here to talk about the company as much as what we did on the investment and monetization side. So, Paul, I think you said you started in 2004. We started in 2005. So it's been a little while. I guess the moral of the story is be patient. I know a lot of friends that have started companies over the past 20-something, 25 years, and I don't know of many that were 2 or 3 year wild runs. There's usually a decade, probably usually a decade before that nobody knows about because they're only looking at the last 2 or 3 or 4 years because that's their focus. It's when things really start to grow. So I'm going to do the blood, sweat, and tears. I'm going to give you 3 simple stories of what we experienced starting the company all the way through where we are today, and hopefully you find some value. So when we started the company, I told you we kind of came up with this idea. We went back. I had taken the previous company was the traditional VC route, and I absolutely have scars on my back, and I was the CTO. I wasn't the one leading. I wasn't the CEO. I wasn't the one leading this activity. They were great at times, and it was very painful. I mean, I not to use too extreme of a metaphor, but there was times I literally felt like I was on the gallows with the noose loosely around my neck. They were kind of waiting for any move to kick the box out from under you. I mean, it was tenuous at times. That money came at a very high price in the previous company, and it's almost amazing that we made it through, especially taking it early on. I think, Paula, you said you wouldn't be here, having taken it at an early time. It was a very challenging situation. This time I decided we're going to do it in the exact opposite. I want to fund this thing ourselves. We want to be creative about it. We want to get to a position where we have a real business, we have real customers, we have real revenue. We want to have cash in the bank. We want to be cash flow positive. We want to have no debt. I said, why not? Let's try it. We've got a good idea. We got this kind of radical idea to take almost an extreme on the funding side, and let's see what we can do. In this case, it required me to bleed. I wrote the first check. I remember the first $50,000 check that I wrote to put into the business to just try to get things started. That came after, though, having the idea, and fortunately, I'm a software engineer. Maybe not fortunately, I don't know. But for me, it was fortunate because I said, I got the idea. I'm going to go build a prototype myself and see what I can do. So it really didn't cost me anything other than my time. I had to buy a few things, but I said, I'm going to try to put something together to test the theorem, see if it's possible. And after that, I realized this is something that has legs. This is something I think that's going to be of interest to companies. I didn't realize we were 8 years too early. I think that was part of our, you start and you think, oh, this is the next great thing. And little did I realize it was 7 or 8 more years before this became an interesting topic of conversation. Even just 3 years ago, this was way below the radar. So wrote the check, put skin in the game, had a business partner at the time, and he decided to write a similar check. We took a very similar approach, no salary. I don't even think we covered expenses for a while. So we were continuing to put in. That's not always an easy thing. We were fortunate to be in a decent position after the last business. Someone asked, well, how would you do that otherwise? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how we would have figured that out. But with the opportunity was there, so we decided to do it. Also on the friend side, I wanted to keep it very lightweight. So early on, we went out and started to look for a couple customers. We had 2 core accounts that we were able to land. We showed off our prototype. We said, is this of interest? We're licensing software, so we're not selling a packaged product. So we said, are you guys interested in building on this platform? They didn't know it was not completely baked. It looked pretty good. So we sold it before it was done. I admit it. And we were able to, we charged 50% up front for the license fees. We're a software as a service, so we basically charged a year in advance, but we charge monthly, so it's a continuous form of revenue for us. And we'll talk a little bit about how we were able to use some of that to help fund the company. But really the bleeding, one of the things that we found was that we needed to be frugal when necessary, but in our case, this is an old picture of our original server rack. I know we're not Google. Google has their picture of their original rack of servers, but this was ours. I mean, this represented almost 200K of infrastructure, and I remember writing the check, and it was a huge deal because our customers were tiny at the time because they pay as they grow, and so this was like going all in. We had a couple laptops. We're working literally out of the basement. We had our 3rd child, and so I was kicked out of my office in the house and pushed down into the basement at the time. We spent everything we had on infrastructure because we're hosting this, we're managing this for our customers. That was part of our value proposition. So we knew without this, all the great software in the world was useless anyway. So we decided to go all in. At this point, I had called up my previous business partner, and I said, hey, I'm starting this company. I helped you. We got out of the last company. I said, are you interested? And he said, yeah. What do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I said, the company doesn't have any revenue. We just spent all of our money. So why don't we call it even at $1 million valuation? We'll take 100K. We'll give you 10%. And so he was really our first investor. But that was based off of past history. It wasn't someone that we went out and were looking for people. It was that friends and family style. They're willing to put their trust and put their money where their mouth was as far as really bleeding with us at this point, because we didn't have a revenue plan. We didn't have it wasn't a solid business plan. This was based on a concept that this might work, that there was some needs out there, and we're going to see what we can come up with. When we look back, I mean, this purchase was probably one of those critical things, in the skimping on some of the other things that we did was also critical. It's the ramen noodles and Kraft macaroni and cheese approach. You eat light there, but you occasionally are able to go out and enjoy yourself. And so that's kind of where we started with that somewhat frugal approach. Spend money when necessary. My great-grandfather always reminded us as kids to watch the pennies and the dollars would take care of themselves. I think it's a Ben Franklin quote. He was a Swede. Swedes were notoriously frugal at times, and he was like the rest of them. And he reminded us of that. And that's really what it was we kept very focused. I think Paula talked about it too, just on terms and contracts. Every time you can save $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000, I don't care how many millions you're doing in revenue, that's good money. It's valuable money. It gives you the luxury of making decisions without having to have one hand tied behind your back. Even growing larger companies, I think that's something that people quickly lose sight of, especially when revenue and business starts to explode. This is an old picture of the first official office. The house wasn't purple at the time. I went and took this the other day. The paint was peeling off, and I had to get out of the office because we actually had customers that wanted to visit with us, and we had no place to visit. It was like, and these were big customers. These were Fortune 100 companies that, there was only so many times you could say, oh, no, let me come to you. Okay, we want to come out and start to see what's going on. And so, I went on Craigslist, and this was like 2 o'clock in the morning. There was this person that owned a real estate office, which what this house was, $300 a month. I said, this is great, $300. I'll take, it was like 1,800 square feet. It's the first floor of this old house. I said, it's cool, it's got some character. It's down the street, we'll make it work. So it was great. The guy was a really nice guy that ran it, and all of a sudden he died suddenly. It was awful. He had a heart attack, and he died. And so we're kind of like in the middle of this, and we're starting to get some momentum, but we didn't have enough money to get the regular corporate space because we were spending every penny we had, reinvesting, to your point, reinvesting in the company, still not taking any money. This is a couple years into it, paying myself expenses at least, and we had some employees, so paying their salaries. So everything's going back into the company, staying all in. And I remember it distinctly as one day I came in, and this is the sweat equity part of it. You're working all night. You're working on a Saturday. My daughter was old enough where I'm like, you're 12. Come on in and build servers and clone software for us. It's time to learn because this is your college tuition right here to help us. So you go through that kind of classic sweat application. But I remember one day I'm walking in, and the son had taken over the real estate business, and he was an interesting kid. But his girlfriend's passed out on the stairwell, kind of walking over, getting to the office. He had some buddies that had set up shop there and were living there. And I said, this is enough's enough. So there's a certain time where you have to decide where there's when the extremes are no longer relevant anymore. Time for an upgrade. Time to make the right decision and get out. But this was quite an interesting place. The other thing I noticed was this was the moment where we started to get some real contracts. We had a contract with British Petroleum and Boeing Aerospace. They were big contracts for us. These were big deals because you're kind of going face to face with organizations that are very savvy, that have accounting and operations and their business development and legal, and we don't have any of that. I've had my corporate counsel that was on retainer for years. I've known her for many years, and she was great. She said, "I'll take your retainer back because you can't afford it anyway." But she says, "We'll do work for you." These companies had all in-house facilities, so while we were negotiating with these, we won a few contracts, and one of the things I noticed that happen, everybody comes out of the woodwork because they smell some amount of success. We were trying to fly a little bit under the radar, wanted to build the company, prove out what we were doing, but people started to hear about this. So all of a sudden, for instance, I remember we were looking for like a marketing and sales because we didn't have any sales organization. We were out there ourselves trying to pitch the business, show what we were doing, and he saw that we had some glimmer of hope in our revenue. We had some contracts, and they weren't big yet, but they were starting to build a little momentum. And one of the things I found that was all of a sudden he wanted he wanted the top pay, like almost like he was coming out of a classic Fortune 50 company. He wanted the guaranteed $200K a year bonus. He wanted the base salary of $185K. Plus, he wanted 10% of the company. I'm like, well, we haven't even gone on a date yet. We don't know each other that well. It's just not the right time to go through this. And so we had to find employees that were willing to start small as we were, put their own risk and sweat in the company. We were willing to pay them. We were willing to give them salaries, but they weren't expecting everything up front. They were willing to go along this journey with us. And I think as a business owner, that's been an interesting path. A lot of people that you thought might step up to the plate don't, and some of the ones you least expect actually do. And I think there's a little bit of sifting there. I've never been successful to date kind of bringing in the rock star. It always ends up seeming to fall apart on us. And for whatever reason, it's probably us. So, at this point, we started to grow. We had put in the sweat equity. Again, as a Swede, I think back to the company like IKEA. You go buy something at IKEA, these kind of very simple rooms and furniture and kind of glued together wood. But they have two uses for everything. The table doubles as a day bed, and the chair doubles as a sofa. It's the same mentality. Is there an opportunity to think about everything that we do and find the dual purpose? Because you have to multitask, and you have to find a limit to where you're going to break. You can't do everything. You also need to find when is the right time to stop trying to do certain things ourselves, bring in a new team member. And that can be a scary situation at times, just trying to figure out when is it time to bring someone new in, when should I stay, when is it not time, when should I just tighten the belt, stay up that extra night, finish the work myself, or have someone else in the group that's willing to do the same thing. I think there's a lot of sweating that goes on. The kind of the third situation was, and again, I distinctly remember this. We were starting to get some momentum back in 2008. We were 3 years into this. We had some nice contracts starting to build. I think we were close to close. We were going to do about $1 million that year in revenue. So we were happy. We cash flow positive. We didn't owe anybody anything at this point. We kind of paid back all our debts. We between leasing and owning, we were in decent shape, and our customers were growing. All of a sudden, August comes along, and it's kind of like being, look at me, I'm not a fighter, but if I was in a fight, I would be down on the ground fast. I wouldn't have much of a chance. August of 2008 was like that moment in time. It was the market literally crashed, so all of our customers didn't go away, they just stopped spending. It was like we're only going to spend on exactly what we've committed to, but they were paralyzed with fear, so there's no growth. My business partner was, without going, things had devolved. He was taking advantage of the company, taking advantage of us as a business. He had to go. That was a challenging time as well. I had my father had passed that same weekend. It was kind of a bad time. It was like you get kicked, in the teeth, you're punched in the stomach, and you're still down. They kick you one more time. So you're thinking about like, this is a challenging situation. What are we going to do? And I think on the funding side, we had $8 left in the bank. I actually took a picture of the bank account. For some reason, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna, it is what it is. We're either gonna go one way or the other. I was done putting money into it. I had put as much as I could put into the company. We were in that pause, so it's useless to try to go out to raise money. You're gonna give up all control. You probably won't get it. I wouldn't be able to go raise money at that rate. It's just not. I don't think it's very possible. And so it was one of these situations where you almost have to grab yourself by the bootstraps and you're kind of bloodied and beat up and just drag yourself up, pull yourself up. And I remember we had this customer that was very, very interested in licensing our software for a very large, and in fact, mining application for coal mines in the States. It was a safety system for underground communication and operational intelligence that they were building on our platform. And they were really aggressive, large company, very, very aggressive about pricing. We have to take the price and a third or in half of what we were currently going to market with. And it's some strange, I remember I got on a plane and I flew down and I said, I want to meet with you guys. I've been really thinking about this. And they didn't know we had $8 in the bank. They didn't know all this other stuff that was going on. And I said, I think we can come up with something, but you have to prepay us 100% for the application, and we'll grant your terms. And all of a sudden, within about 2.5 months, we had checks for about $1.5 million on that application. Is it luck? Is it I don't know. But it was, trying to extract, that, in a bad situation, where normally we might negotiate more. We saw the opportunity there to fund the company again. We had a product. We had something real. We knew all this bad stuff that was going on was a moment in time. We had confidence in what we were doing, but we needed funding, and it wasn't the right time to raise it. So we basically used customer revenue to re-raise money for us. And as a software company, it was great because we didn't have hard product to deliver later on. It wasn't like we took that money and had to go out and build something later. We already had the product. They were simply prepaying us for license and royalty revenues in advance. So cost of doing business for us was radically different than someone that's selling a hardware product or a prepackaged product that they in a box store, for instance. So for us, taking it made an awful lot of sense, and it really restarted the company. It was a kind of a second birth of the company. In this case, I thought of something. I remind the team on occasions not to overthink things. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Sometimes good enough is great, and that's what this situation was. I would have liked to have the higher. Looking back, our revenues would have looked better, our margins would have looked better, but we would have been out of business anyway. So it was irrelevant. So in this case, sometimes just try to find that glimmer of value in a tough situation. So that negotiation, living that dual existence where the customer doesn't necessarily know what's going on, for them it didn't really matter. In the end, they were delighted. They got better pricing. And they were a huge company. The cash for them was a rounding error. It really made no difference. They were one of the top 20 largest companies in the world. So those are kind of three stories. I guess my summary is we used a combination of personal and friendly money to put skin in the game, to bootstrap the company. We developed a product. We sweated that. We found like-minded people, some of which we knew, some of which were new friends that we learned to build the business with over the years, to come in and have a similar mentality to what we did, how we're going to be frugal, when we're going to spend the money, when we're going to save. It required a team. It wasn't just myself really driving this. It required the whole team to be on board with this. I think if any one member of the team isn't, it can be a challenge. Everybody has to have a similar philosophy. Negotiating with customers, I could tell you a dozen examples where we really used that same thing, upfront payment, terms, and we played the small company card. I remember out in Aspen one time, I went out, they wanted to go skiing, and I'm there, and I said, listen, you're a huge company. We're a tiny company. You love what we do. I was blunt. I said, we need cash. What can you do for us to help tide us over until the existing revenues start to grow? They brought us in for a $200K professional service contract, 50% down, and 50% due before it was even finished. And those kind of things. We were, I guess, honesty paid. in this sense. And in a world sometimes where on the venture side and the equity side, sometimes there's a lot of smoke and mirrors or fog on the swamp, I like to call it. We were very transparent with these individuals, and we said, we're growing the business, and we were confident in the product that we had. We knew it worked. We knew it was going to work for them, and we really kind of looked, we stared in the face of fear and simply stood our ground. I think also the ability to walk away from bad contracts is something that's very important too. There's been more than one customer I have called up, and I don't do it regularly, but sometimes you have to be able to say, at this point in time, it's not the right relationship with us. And it may be later on, but sometimes certain contracts are going later on down the road. We had a contract very early on. If we took that, it would have been very, very painful for the company. And to be able to, it's tough to walk away when there's money on the table, especially when you're a startup. So I know that this is a somewhat, I think we echo some of the similar things that Paul has done. As a company, we've put ourselves in a position now where we're cash flow positive, we make a profit, we have cash in the bank. We're not a ton of it, but we have enough now where when we raise money, we're doing it on our terms. I think we've paid the price for persevering through all the years. And we are going to raise some money this year. The markets for the Internet of Things, when Google bought Nest last January, I was in San Francisco at a meeting. Someone sent me a text message right before I walked into this meeting. I said, this is great. From people not interested to companies spending $3.25 billion for a home automation and thermostat maker. I said, this is we can't ask for anything more. And so this year has been a year where we went from multiples of 1 to 5x to 20 to 30x for just against revenue. And so I think for us being able to raise money, we can raise a few $1 million, put that to work in the business, and we'll be able to do it at a fraction of what we would be able to do it just a few years ago. So we're in the same place. We're out, working with some folks, met some great people, and we're being very selective on how we're going to raise some dough. So that's, I guess, those are a few stories. Hopefully they're useful. I guess open it up for questions, if any.
About asking your customers, or them asking, we're a developer, and the customers will say to us, well, could you give us better terms? And I'm thinking, okay, so if I have money in the bank, and what are you going to get these days? 1% on your money
Nothing,
a year?
right? Yeah.
If I've got money in the bank, why wouldn't I use that to get business?
Right.
It's like, okay, for 1% less, I'm going to have a friend and a customer.
Right.
So if you look at, when you go into these negotiations.
Terms are huge, there's no doubt. I mean, you're saying it, Paula said it. I mean, spending the acts, being thoughtful about how you're paying and how you're working with your customers, I think it makes and breaks these businesses. It's I don't know, I've seen companies raise 5, 10, even $30 million and blow through it. It's easy to blow through that. You think it's a lot, and you can blow through that in a year or two, and all of a sudden you're staring there, you're looking at some beautiful office space and a high travel bill, and you're wondering where all that money went. And you don't have much to show for it. So I think the terms, it's amazing. It's a small thing, but it really makes a difference between some success and failure, or having to give up control.
Do you even buy servers anymore? You had this box there.
Yeah, we still lease kind of the edge of our. Leasing's been great. Favorable terms. Especially as we evolve, we built credit with some of the larger organizations, so we were able to work at great rates. As you show some success, they get excited about the opportunity that you're going to grow. So we've tried to find vendors that want to learn about us, that want to be part of the journey, and we have a lot of brand loyalty too. we'll work with someone that's been supportive of us. Sometimes even if their product isn't the best price, sometimes they extend certain terms or get us in on an early version of a product that helps us be more successful, and we really appreciate that, and we're going to go back to them and work with them. So do we buy things? No. I mean, cash is king, and we try to keep as much in the bank as possible. So we're always looking for ways to leverage that cash that we have. The more we can keep in, the more leverage we tend to have. Yeah.
How did you use events and venues like this one, if at all? And what would you suggest? So that
I forgot to actually, yeah.
people are dark. You know, now you're here because you've got a little extra time. But
I wish.
right, how would you recommend people use that time resource at the beginning?
So we spent our early time laser focused on trying to solve the problem and trying to support our customers, our few customers, solving the problem. Everything we did was about helping our customer be successful, because we knew that without that, all the great ideas in the world don't mean anything anyway. Speaking about events, about probably 3 years ago, we had hired a marketing firm to start to bring us out, put together some branding and web content. I mean, you can blow a ton of money in that space. It's an endless hole that you can dump into, so you have to be thoughtful about that. We ended up going through a couple companies, and we ended up finally our third one that we were working with. Great folks, they're delivering a lot of value and quality. But one of the things that came up were events. Like, do you sponsor shows? Do we go to every trade show? Which ones do we go to? Do we go to ones about our industry? Do we go to ones about the markets that we're trying to solve? And everybody wants you to sponsor one of these things. And the sponsors are great. Thank you for the beverages and cocktails and the food. It's an endless pit that you can put money into. And we decided we would not sponsor an event. We would not sponsor an event. We would only sponsor an event if we felt like it, but we weren't going to sponsor events to be able to get speaking engagements. So that we were going to separate the two. If we wanted to sponsor something for the good of the industry, good for us. But if we were going to speak, it had nothing to do with sponsorship. And we stood our ground, and no one wanted us there. And then 18 months ago, we were invited to an event, and then you start to get invited to another one, and another one. And I was weird. This September, I took a little time off in August with my kids, like a few days. And I come back in September, and I think I had 8 speaking gigs, 2 keynotes at pretty large conferences in like a 5-week period. It was exhausting, like running from one place to the other. So I think just deciding where you want to put your capital in holding your ground, I think it's a good point. And if people find value in what you have to say, if you truly believe in what you're doing and just stick with it, and if there's value in it, you're going to get invited. Sometimes you do have to weasel your way into a few events that you probably didn't deserve to be there. And so there's a little bit of creativity that you need to find, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's a sign of a true entrepreneurial spirit. Find your way into the party, even if you weren't invited. Be a good guest, and you'll meet people. Yeah.
What future plans do you have for your company? Do you have any exit strategy, or are you planning to keep the company for yourself?
At some point, it would be nice to take another vacation. It was about 10 years ago when I took the last one. This is an interesting space. If a great opportunity came around tomorrow and someone offers us a 30, 40x multiple, that's, okay. They may want the team to stay on for a couple of years as part of a transition. We want to see our vision fulfilled of being able to provide a software platform so people can build great applications to take advantage of connectivity in the Internet of Things. We want to see more great verticals come out of this. We will raise some money. We want to continue. The bulk of that is really, we don't have a sales force today either. It's been through some word of mouth. It's been through some very strategic. We're going to make a decision to go after this customer and work our way into that customer. I think build up some more on the sales and marketing side. There's a lot of money being put into this space right now. There's a certain level which we have to play because some of these companies have taken $20, $30 million and they're spending it like crazy on the marketing side, making a lot of noise. We don't have to do the same thing, but you have to be in the same conversation at least. So I think for us, it's really continuing the evolution of the platform, continuing to invest in developer adoption, find companies that want to spin up new verticals. And I think at some point we'll be a great acquisition candidate. Or we take the other route. We buy up a few companies, build up verticals internally, and we IPO it like the last one. Either one's, I'm open to either. Hank.
So, Jonathan, one of the things that kind of concerns me about a lot of these buzzwords, and so I think of Internet of Things as a buzzword. And I don't really believe that even the big companies that are investing in the Internet of Things really, other than the fact that it's an interesting thing to talk about, that the value that they're generating from the Internet of Things. The thing that I really appreciated about what Paula talked about in terms of the focus on emergency responders, the things that you kind of alluded to but not really focused on, which I know, the success that you've had in the marine area, the success that you've had in dealing with the mining, which are real high value things for your customers. To me, that's what it's all about. It's creating that value. It's not tying into a trend, because I think companies that try to tie into a trend are going to lose out.
Absolutely. I mean, we started off solving real problems and letting companies build applications to solve a market vertical problem. If you want to go out and solve a safety, build a safety application, why build it from scratch? We're going to give you 80% of the functionality so you can get started. You build the 20% that's unique to your safety market. Underground mining's been a great application. The bulk of U.S. coal mines run a platform that our customer built for safety and operations. Again, we're not necessarily in that market, but we provided them 80% of the functionality with our software platform so they could build, they could take build the customization to go out and solve that problem and monetize that. In the asset tracking, fleet tracking, same thing. Our customers, maybe we're not building tracking applications, but our customers are. And they're out solving problems of where the locations of high-value assets or transportation or smart traffic shaping. So I think it's much more than a buzzword. We provide a generic platform to build all of these things. I mean, in our mind, we want to be like the Red Hat or Linux of the interconnected network of things. I mean, it's a lofty goal, but that's what we set out to do. Because we know that there's plenty of smart application developers out there that are going to go out and solve a very specific problem. Maybe someone has a wearable for home health care for someone that has Alzheimer's, for instance. Right? A very specific application, great application. They know that market. They're gonna know how to interact in that market. We know we're going to give them the tool set to be able to build that application much faster and less expensive than they're going to build on their own. Does that answer it?
You're the middleware.
We are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the middleware. And we have an interest working with Sine-Wave because they are the middleware. And you need that device so that we can fulfill our mission when we go into the first responder community or the protecting critical infrastructure, because so many devices are going to play into that. You need to pull in other technologies, and that middleware is key. And what he's involved in, the Internet of Things, when you throw that out, it's a massive industry. The analysts can't get a hold of how big this market is. Cisco actually announced a month ago that they believe that the Internet of Things is going to be $3 trillion. It's the next big wave. It's a tidal wave. But what Jonathan is doing and what we recognize and what we see is that he has that special application that plays in the middle. And you need that to layer for companies like ours to interconnect with multiple different technologies and solve problems.
So his company is the nexus between your company and the other company. So if we think of a Venn diagram, the little cat's eye piece, he's the nexus.
We said from day one, we want to be able to work, we want people to be able to create great applications. We want them to be able to choose to work with any hardware that is on the market or has yet to be invented or is built at homegrown. We want network providers to compete and evolve. We don't care if it's satellite, wireless, sub-gigahertz, Zigbee, whatever the standards are. It makes no difference to us. We want to bring all of that material together and provide a platform to build business intelligence, to extract the data that's meaningful, sift through all the nonsense, separate, but really tune that signal-to-noise ratio so you can find that valuable piece of information that saves a life, that provides a communication, that tells someone that they need to see a doctor, that reduces carbon output in a city, or reduces the overall energy consumption in a building like this. And those are the real applications. They're not made up and they're not a buzzword. They're things that we see going on every day.
Maybe you could talk about the relationship between buzzwordness, which
There's a lot of them.
I work at Gartner, so we have the hype cycle.
Right.
So maybe you could talk about the relationship
The trough of disillusionment.
exactly, a buzzword and funding.
Right.
So I think there's some relevance there.
Absolutely.
So if you have a buzzword, how does that affect your ability to get money? How does that?
5x extra if you're on the right time, it literally can make the difference between 5x the multiplier or not. If you're on the other, if you're too early, you may have a couple times revenue at best. If there's a sweet spot on the curve. I'm surprised at some of these companies that are spending 20, 30x on companies that are losing a ton of money. They don't necessarily even have a baked product. Good for them. And on the other side of it too, on the downward trend, once that buzz is passed, the community where free money is available tends to tighten up very quickly. There's a short window in my experience. I saw it. I was there in the valley from like 96 to 2000, and it was all of a sudden the Honda Accords were replaced with Maseratis. Everyone was hanging at Spagos. The parties were crazy. And then it went away just as quickly. The Ford Focus with crank windows and no AC was back out in front of Spagos. It was like you see it. And this I wrote a blog about this actually. There's no doubt there's a lot of hype and noise around this. And I think the good thing that comes out of that is when it does kind of pop to a certain extent, and it will have to, it separates the reality from the fact from the fiction. The real companies that are out there are going to make it through, hopefully. Hopefully they've set themselves up for that. But generally speaking, a lot of the fluff and noise and kind of smoke gets pushed aside. We think of what people call Internet 2.0. Is it really a new set of technologies? Not necessarily. It was that all the noise was separated from the good stuff that was out there, and those companies really had even more accelerated growth. So I don't think it's fiction what we're seeing. I mean, these numbers are the conservative ones, and we're seeing those in practice. But there is a certain amount of going along with the hype as far as valuation and money, raising money. At that point in time, it's sometimes a good time to raise some dough. I mean, it's the reason we're thinking about it. We held off. We wanted to wait until a point where we would be more attractive. There's no doubt.
We got about 3 minutes left.
Okay. One, and then go.
What kind of intellect or background does someone who you would take money from have to have?
We are always looking for people that respect what we're going to do with the capital and tend to have a portfolio where we feel like our business is going to have application. Can they get us into a market that maybe we've had a tough time penetrating? It's not just about the money. It's really important for us for them to be on board with what we're doing. I've been in situations where they have what I call the quarterly leash. If 90 days you didn't make your quarter, the noose is pulled, You're taken out back and beaten relentlessly, and you might be brought back in. It's the way it is. So you want someone that's going to have some amount of vision. You've got lumpy sales cycles. You've got things happen. Life happens. And so for them to be able to understand that this is a long-term play, they'll be able to monetize it. They deserve to make their money back over and over and over again. But we want someone where their portfolio has application, their money has time associated with it.
No matter what, the right people need to know at the right time.
Absolutely.
In order for, this day and age, people need to know. And I would think that just the insurance savings alone, if you can prove to somebody that you have these systems in place to prevent you from, disasters, that it would have to be a big savings in insurance.
We have a new customer that makes the fire extinguisher gauges. The ones that have been around forever, the little coil gauges, full, empty, faulty. They're putting Zigbee sensors. They're putting a sensor in the back of every one of those to create a wireless mesh network in the buildings because by law, they're required to be there anyway. So they're using that to build out infrastructure so that they can, things like insurance is a big deal. If a building puts that, let's say a big hotel chain put that in every hotel, or a big supermarket chain put that everywhere, could the insurance company give them a 8% break per annum? That'd be a lot of money. And so those are the kind of applications people are thinking about, not just connecting for the sake of it, but what can they turn that into? One more?
Have you ever thought about packing your bags and heading out to California?
I grew up here in Natick, out on the East Coast. I spent most of a 10-year period not here, in Europe, Asia, India, and the West Coast. It's a lot of fun. It's great. It's a different environment. I have to admit, we have some of the best schools out here. We produce as an area some of the brightest kids that come out of the universities. It's a great asset for us. They come back. I can't tell you how many stories, because they realize how quickly they blow the money that they had and have to end up, they end up realizing that Boston has changed itself, and the New England area has changed itself. I think there's a lot of people that have been putting a lot of energy to try to keep the brain drain from happening and keep assets here and build companies. The IoT, 495 to 128 up to New Hampshire, down to Rhode Island, there's more IoT companies out here than anywhere else in the world right now.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
When I first met John, walked into your office, and
Those stories are true.
there was this monolith, like from, was it 2001, A Space Odyssey, in his office. It was this huge thing. And I said, where have I seen that before? Any rock and roll players here? Anybody do rock and roll? Come on, you got to admit.
He plays the harmonica. We jammed
okay,
together.
all right.
So
That's what I recognize.
I didn't recognize him tonight. I don't have a guitar on.
So what do you have in your office?
Well, I am a musician. I play the blues. We do a rock and blues every Sunday night at Johnstone's in Ashland. If you want to come by, bring your drumsticks, bring your pipes, whatever you want, we'll get you up there. But I do play guitar. I collect too. So he walked in, he saw Hendrix's stack from Woodstock, that big Marshall stack. So it's my little bit of artwork in the office. It was more because we ran out of room in the house. My wife's like, get this stuff out of here. So anyway.
And Paula, I saw a picture on the internet with you and a Corvette, and I understand you love Corvettes. When you go on vacation,
I'll be driving off of my Corvette.
a particular Corvette? Do you like the brand new ones, or are you
I have a
vintage?
whole fleet. I have a whole list that I like to get. And a barn of.
So we know the gift for you, right?
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. Anything that you didn't get clear before we leave? Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it.